Cleo Ruby had learned that silence was survival. In the pristine halls of the Kim family mansion, she moved like morning mist, present but unacknowledged. For 3 years, she had perfected the art of invisibility, serving Korean Mafia boss Kyung-soo Kim with a grace that masked the forbidden love burning quietly in her chest. Tomorrow, Kyung-soo Kim would marry Mercy Harper, and Cleo's quiet heartbreak would finally be buried beneath vows she had no right to mourn. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you, especially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story. The champagne flutes are dusty. Mercy's voice cut through the murmur of arriving guests, sharp enough to silence nearby conversations. She stood in white lace that probably cost more than Cleo earned in a year, her blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo, ice-blue eyes fixed on Cleo with barely concealed contempt. I specifically told you Crystal must be spotless, or is attention to detail beyond your capabilities? Cleo kept her voice steady, professional. I polished them this morning, Miss Harper. I'll check again. Of course you will. Mercy's laugh was practiced cruelty wrapped in politeness. That's what maids do, isn't it? Fix their mistakes when their betters point them out? 2 of Mercy's bridesmaids drifted closer, designer handbags tucked under their arms like weapons of exclusion. The taller one, a redhead dripping in diamonds, smirked. Honestly, Mercy, I don't know how you tolerate having her around. She just doesn't fit, does she? So jarring against all this elegance. The hair alone, the other one whispered, loud enough for Cleo to hear. So unprofessional. Wild. Cleo's natural curls were pulled back neatly, professionally, the way they'd been every day for 3 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a champagne flute, the only visible crack in her composure. Mercy stepped closer, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper that somehow carried across the ballroom. You're just a maid, Cleo. Just help. You move things, you clean things. You're part of the furniture. So know your place and stop acting like you belong in spaces meant for real people. The words landed like physical blows. Around them, elite guests in silk and diamonds pretended not to listen while absorbing every syllable of humiliation. Cleo felt her carefully constructed invisibility shattering, exposing the raw wound of existing in a world that had never wanted her. Then the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Kyung-soo Kim stood in the ballroom entrance, devastating in a bold red suit that broke every traditional rule, his dark eyes fixed on his fiancée with an expression that made grown men step back. The dragon tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with barely contained fury as he moved forward with predatory grace, and Cleo's heart stopped beating entirely. He had heard everything. Kyung-soo's finger extended toward Mercy like a blade, steady and absolute. The gesture was simple, devastating, a public condemnation that silenced 300 guests in an instant. His voice, when it came, carried the controlled fury of a man who had built an empire on calculated violence and iron discipline. The wedding is cancelled. The ballroom seemed to inhale sharply, collectively. Mercy's face drained of color, her perfect composure fracturing like thin ice. Kyung-soo, darling, what are you... Now. He didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. The single word carried enough weight to crush arguments before they formed. You will leave my home. Immediately. You can't be serious. Mercy's laugh came out brittle, desperate. She reached for him, but he stepped back with such deliberate coldness that she flinched. The guests are here. The families have traveled from Korea. The contracts are signed. You're upset, I understand, but we can discuss this privately. There is nothing to discuss. Kyung-soo's dark eyes hadn't left her face, and Cleo recognized the expression she'd seen him wear during business negotiations that ended with his enemies destroyed. I have spent the past 6 months watching you, measuring you, giving you chances to prove you were worthy of standing beside me. He took a step forward, and Mercy instinctively retreated. You have failed spectacularly. Guests whispered behind hands, smartphones already emerging despite the strict no-photo policy. This was the scandal of the decade. A Korean mafia boss canceling his wedding minutes before the rehearsal dinner in front of everyone who mattered in their world. This is about her, isn't it? Mercy's voice turned shrill, desperate. She pointed at Cleo, who stood frozen near the champagne tower, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might escape her chest. That maid has poisoned you against me. Can't you see what she's doing? She's manipulated you, playing the victim. Stop talking. The command was quiet, lethal. Kyung-soo turned to Cleo then, and his expression underwent a transformation that made her breath catch. Miss Ruby has served my household with grace, intelligence, and dignity for 3 years. She has shown more character in a single day than you have in 6 months. He looked back at Mercy, and ice returned. She is more worthy than anyone in this room, including me. The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Mercy's face contorted with rage and humiliation. You're throwing away everything, our families, the alliances, your reputation, for a black maid? Have you lost your mind? I've found it. Kyung-soo gestured, and 2 security personnel materialized as if summoned by thought alone. Escort Miss Harper from the property. She is no longer welcome here. Kyung-soo, please. Mercy's designer heels scraped against marble as security moved toward her. My family won't accept this. The council will let them demand. His voice could have frozen fire. I look forward to their objections. As security escorted Mercy toward the exit, her bridesmaids scrambling after her, the ballroom dissolved into chaos. Guests clustered in scandalized groups, voices rising. Family members shouted questions in Korean. Wedding planners stood paralyzed, clutching tablets and flower samples. And Cleo, invisible Cleo, who had spent 3 years perfecting the art of not being seen, stood at the center of a storm that would either destroy her or transform everything she thought was possible. Kyung-soo crossed the ballroom toward her, and 300 pairs of eyes tracked his movement. Come with me, he said quietly, extending his hand. Please. Kyung-soo's private office was all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. Cleo had cleaned this room 1,000 times, but had never truly occupied its space until now. She stood near the door, every instinct screaming at her to run, while he moved to pour 2 glasses of whiskey with hands that were perfectly steady despite having just detonated his entire life. I've watched you for 3 years, Cleo. The words landed softly, but their impact was seismic. He turned to face her, still in that bold red suit that seemed to declare war on tradition itself, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. 3 years of noticing everything you thought no one saw. Mr. Kim, Kyung-soo. His voice was firm but gentle. My name is Kyung-soo, and you're going to say it. Cleo's carefully constructed composure was crumbling. You don't understand what you've done, what this will cost you. Then tell me what I've missed. He moved closer, and she could smell his cologne, something expensive and distinctly him. Tell me I'm wrong about the Korean language books hidden in your room, about how you've been learning for 2 years so you could understand the conversations happening around you. Her breath caught. She hadn't known he knew. Tell me I imagined how you stay late every Tuesday to help the kitchen staff with their English homework, how you donated half your salary last year to a women's shelter in Itaewon. His voice softened. How you look at me when you think I'm not watching, like I'm something you're not allowed to want. Stop. The word came out broken. Please stop. Why? He was close enough now that she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the one she'd memorized from 3 years of stolen glances. Because I'm finally saying what we've both been pretending doesn't exist? Because I'm black! The words exploded from her, 3 years of swallowed pain erupting. Because I'm a maid in a world where people like me are invisible by design. Because your family, your business partners, your entire culture will see me as a disgrace. Your world will destroy us both. Kyung-soo's expression hardened into something absolutely lethal. Then I'll destroy that world first. The declaration hung between them, impossible and terrifying and somehow inevitable. Cleo felt tears burning her eyes, 3 years of careful invisibility dissolving. You don't know what you're saying, the cultural barriers alone. I know exactly what I'm saying. He reached up slowly, giving her time to retreat, and cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything his reputation promised. His thumb traced her cheekbone, the first time in 3 years he'd touched her beyond accidental brush of fingers. I'm saying that I've spent 3 years bound by duty, by tradition, by expectations that were suffocating me. I'm saying that watching you has been the only real thing in my manufactured life. His touch was breaking something open inside her, something she'd locked away for survival. I'm saying that you are brilliant, kind, and stronger than anyone I've ever met, and I'm saying that I'm done pretending I don't love you. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable as gravity. His lips found hers with a hunger restrained for too long, and Cleo stopped fighting the impossible thing that had been growing between them. She kissed him back, 3 years of longing pouring into the contact, her hands finding the lapels of his red suit and holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kyung-soo rested his forehead against hers. "You will be my wife," he whispered, and it was both promise and threat, "and anyone who objects will answer to me." The Kim family elders arrived like a tribunal, expensive cars pulling up to the mansion in formation. Kyung-soo's uncle, Park Jin-ho, entered first, a silver-haired man whose traditional hanbok seemed designed to emphasize the cultural chasm he perceived. Behind him came aunts, cousins, business associates, all wearing expressions that ranged from disappointment to barely concealed fury. Cleo stood beside Kyung-soo in the formal sitting room, her simple black dress suddenly feeling like armor that was far too thin. She had faced racism before, had survived it, but never like this, never with so much at stake, never with the man she loved standing between her and his entire heritage. "Nephew." Jin-ho's voice was cold, precise. He spoke in Korean, a deliberate choice. "Explain this madness that has brought shame to our family name." "There is no shame in choosing love over arrangement," Kyung-soo replied in English, equally deliberate. "And we will speak English so Cleo understands every word." Jin-ho's lips thinned. "This is not our way. You were to marry within our community, strengthen our position. Instead, you humiliate us by canceling a strategic alliance for—" His gaze swept over Cleo with open disdain. "For someone who does not belong in our world." "Careful, uncle." Kyung-soo's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Very careful. She is black. She is a maid," an aunt spoke up, her diamond jewelry catching light like weapons. "The other families will see this as weakness, as cultural betrayal. You might as well announce that Kim family traditions mean nothing." Cleo felt the words like physical blows, but she kept her spine straight, her chin up. She had survived worse. She would survive this. Miss Ruby, Jinho addressed her directly, his English heavily accented but clear. You seem intelligent enough to understand that you are a disruption, an impossibility. Surely you can see that staying will only bring pain to everyone, including yourself. With respect, Mr. Park, Cleo's voice was steady, controlled. I understand perfectly. I understand that your nephew canceled his wedding to protect me from cruelty. I understand that this situation challenges traditions you hold sacred. But I also understand that I have served this household with dedication for 3 years, and I will not be reduced to a problem that needs removing. Something flickered in Jinho's expression, surprise perhaps that she would speak at all? Accept her, or lose me entirely. Kyung-soo's words fell like an axe. I will walk away from the family business, from the Kim name, from everything. Your choice. The room erupted in protest. You cannot be serious. Think of your father's legacy. This is emotional insanity. I have proof, Kyung-soo cut through the chaos, that Mercy Harper was embezzling from our joint accounts, planning to funnel money to her family's failing operations after the marriage. He slid a folder across the table. She was using me, using us. That is the appropriate match you're defending. Silence fell as Jinho opened the folder, his face darkening with each page. Kyung-soo's younger cousin Minjin spoke up quietly from the corner. Maybe Uncle should ask himself why we're so desperate to maintain traditions that make us vulnerable to betrayal. The American woman was stealing from us, but we defended her because she looked right. Stay out of this, Jinho snapped, but his conviction had wavered. Miss Ruby has never stolen anything. She's learned our language out of respect. She's been loyal when loyalty actually mattered. Maybe that's worth more than appearances. Jinho studied Cleo for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Finally he spoke. You have composure under fire. That, at least, is something. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. This will not be easy, Jinho said finally heavily. The other families will object. There will be consequences. Then we face them, Kyung-soo replied, his hand finding Cleo's. Together. The first death threat arrived in a black envelope, delivered to the mansion gates at dawn. By noon, there were 6 more. Cleo watched from Kim-soo's office as security personnel collected them with practiced efficiency, as if threatening letters were just another form of mail to be sorted. Cultural traitor. Kyung-soo read from his phone, his jaw tight. That's trending on Korean social media, along with several creative suggestions for how I should be punished for dishonoring my heritage. Cleo's hands trembled as she scrolled through her own phone. The photos were everywhere. Her face, her name, her entire life dissected by strangers who had decided she was a villain in a story she hadn't chosen to be part of. The comments ranged from cruel to violent, racism wrapped in concern for cultural preservation. Mercy's family has formally requested a meeting, Kyung-soo continued, his voice dangerously calm. They're invoking old codes, demanding compensation for the public humiliation. Compensation. Cleo's laugh was hollow. What do they want? My head on a platter? Close enough. He set his phone down with controlled precision. They want me to publicly apologize, pay a substantial sum, and agree to never marry outside approved families. Traditional punishment for breaking a contract. Cleo stood abruptly, moving to the window. Below, new security personnel patrolled the grounds. Kyung-soo had tripled the guard presence overnight. The mansion had become a fortress, and she was the reason why. Maybe I should leave. The words came out quietly, but they carried 3 days of accumulated fear. Before someone actually gets killed, before you lose everything you've built, I can disappear, and you can tell them I was the problem, that you came to your senses? Stop. Kyung-soo was behind her in seconds, his hands on her shoulders, turning her to face him. Don't even finish that thought. people want me dead, Kyung-soo." Her voice cracked on his name. "Your own community is calling for your destruction. How long before someone decides to take action instead of just sending letters? Then they'll have to go through me first." His expression was absolute steel, but she saw something flicker beneath it, something raw and frightened that he usually kept buried. "I'm scared too," he admitted, and the confession seemed to cost him. Terrified, actually. Not of losing the business or the family name, of losing you, of making a mistake that gets you hurt. His hands cupped her face with heartbreaking gentleness. "But I refuse to give up. I refuse to let fear win." Cleo looked up at this dangerous, powerful man who had chosen her over everything and felt something shift inside her chest. She had spent 3 years making herself small, accepting invisibility as survival. But maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. "If you're willing to fight," she said, her voice steadying, "then so am I. But we fight together. No more you protecting me while I hide. Partners." Something fierce and grateful blazed in Kyung-soo's eyes. Partners. They spent the next hours at his desk, side by side, as he taught her the landscape of power she was now part of. The 5 Korean syndicate families and their complex alliances, Mercy's family connections and vulnerabilities, the younger generation quietly supportive versus the traditional elders resistant to change. Here, Cleo pointed to a connection on the chart he'd drawn. Mercy's father has business dealings with the Park family, but they've been in competition with the Kims for years. If we can prove Mercy's embezzlement was part of a larger scheme to weaken your position, then we turn their weapon against them. Kyung-soo's expression was admiring, almost awed. "You're brilliant. I've been watching Mafia politics from the shadows for 3 years, she replied with a small smile. "You learn things when people think you're invisible." He caught her hand, threading their fingers together. "You were never invisible to me." Outside, the threats continued. The social media storms raged. The dangerous world closed in from all sides. But inside Kyung-soo's office, 2 people who had been alone in different ways discovered they were stronger together than either had been apart. The formal summons arrived on cream-colored paper, stamped with the seals of all 5 Korean syndicate families. The Korean Council demanded Kyung-soo Kim's presence in 3 days to answer for his disgraceful conduct and violation of traditional codes. The language was diplomatic, but the threat beneath was clear. Correct your mistake or face consequences that would destroy everything. "They're calling it an intervention," Kyung-soo's lawyer explained, his voice tight with worry. "But it's a trial. They want you to publicly renounce the relationship, compensate the Harper family, and submit to council authority by accepting their choice of an appropriate bride." Cleo felt ice flood her veins as she listened from across Kyung-soo's office. Appropriate. That word again, weaponized to exclude her from even the possibility of belonging. "What happens if he refuses?" she asked quietly. The lawyer's expression answered before his words did. Economic sanctions, social exile, potentially violent enforcement if they decide he's become a threat to traditional order. The council has ruled through unity for generations. They won't tolerate open defiance. After the lawyer left, Kyung-soo opened his safe and removed 5 thick folders, spreading them across his desk like cards in a deadly game. Cleo moved closer, reading the names: Park, Choi, Lee, Yoon, Nam. The 5 families who thought they would judge him. "Insurance policies," he said, his voice carrying the cold calculation that made him dangerous in business. 3 years of carefully gathered evidence on each council member, financial irregularities, criminal activities that cross even our flexible lines, secrets they've killed to protect. "You've been planning this for 3 years?" Cleo's breath caught. "I've been preparing for the day I'd need to choose between their approval and my own life." His dark eyes met hers. "I just didn't know what I'd be choosing until you." Over the next 2 days, the mansion became a war room. Kyung-soo made quiet calls to younger family members, to progressive business partners who chafed under the council's traditional restrictions. He was building a coalition, not of the old guard, but of those ready for evolution. Cleo spent hours studying the files, memorizing names and connections, preparing herself mentally for what was coming. She would attend the council meeting. Kyung-soo had insisted, and she had agreed. If they were going to judge her worth, she would face them directly. Mercy's family, meanwhile, was positioning aggressively. Intelligence reports showed them meeting with traditionalist council members, offering expanded alliances in exchange for harsh punishment of Kyung-soo's cultural betrayal. They wanted blood, both literal and metaphorical. The meeting was set for neutral territory, a private room in a traditional Korean restaurant that had hosted syndicate business for 3 generations. Security would be extreme. The stakes could not be higher. The night before, Cleo found Kyung-soo standing at his office window, the city lights reflecting in the glass like stars. She moved to his side, and he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I'm terrified," she admitted against his chest. "Good." His voice rumbled through her. "Fear means you understand the stakes. But trust me, Cleo, I've been planning for this moment for years. Not the specifics, but the confrontation. The day I'd finally refuse to let duty strangle everything real." He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness. "Tomorrow, I either free us both or we burn together. Either way, I'm done living in a cage built by men who died decades ago." Cleo looked up at this dangerous, brilliant man who had chosen her over everything safe and felt something fierce crystallize in her chest. "Then let's show them what freedom looks like." The private room at Hanok Garden was all dark wood and paper screens, traditional elegance masking the violence that had been negotiated within these walls for generations. 5 family heads sat along one side of the low table: Park Jin-ho, Choi Sung-min, Lee Dong-wook, Yoon Ji-hoon, and Nam Kyung-ja, their expressions ranging from stern disappointment to barely concealed hostility. Mercy's father, Richard Harper, sat at the table's end, his presence an anomaly, but his fury unmistakable. Kyung-soo entered with Cleo at his side, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. She wore a simple black dress, and her natural hair pulled back elegantly, her posture radiating quiet dignity despite the gauntlet she was walking into. Kyung-soo, in another bold red suit, guided her to their seats with a hand at the small of her back, a public claim that made several council members stiffen. "This is unprecedented," Park Jin-ho began in Korean, then switched to English at Kyung-soo's sharp look, "bringing her to a council meeting. You compound disrespect with further disrespect." "Miss Ruby is the subject of this tribunal," Kyung-soo replied calmly. "She has the right to face her accusers." Richard Harper slammed his hand on the table. "Let's dispense with formality. You humiliated my daughter publicly, destroyed a strategic alliance, and for what? A maid?" His gaze swept over Cleo with open contempt. "This woman has no family connections, no cultural compatibility, no value to anyone at this table. Remove her from your household, and we can discuss appropriate compensation." "Remove her," Kyung-soo repeated, his voice deadly quiet. "Interesting phrasing." "She doesn't belong in our world," Choi Sung-min interjected. "This is not racism, Kyung-soo. This is reality. Our community, our traditions, our way of life. She has no place in it. Surely even you can see that this infatuation threatens everything we've built." Cleo felt the words like knives, each one designed to reduce her to an obstacle, a problem to be eliminated. But she kept her chin up, her hands steady in her lap. "Gentlemen," Kyung-soo said, his tone conversational, almost pleasant. "You speak of tradition, of protecting what we've built. Let me show you what I've built." He placed 5 folders on the table, one sliding to each council member with practiced precision. Their names were written on each folder in elegant calligraphy. Park Jin-ho opened his first, and his face went white. "That's evidence of your offshore accounts in the Caymans," Kyung-soo explained pleasantly. "The ones you've been using to hide income from both the IRS and your own family. Quite impressive, actually. 15 million over 6 years. Choi Sung-min's folder revealed his connection to a human trafficking operation that even the syndicate considered beyond acceptable bounds. Lee Dong-wook's showed embezzlement from community funds. Yoon Ji-hoon's detailed an affair with a rival family's wife and the bastard child he'd been paying to keep hidden. Nam Kyung-ja's exposed her role in a political assassination that would trigger federal investigations if revealed." The silence was deafening. 3 years, Kyung-soo said softly. 3 years of watching you judge others while hiding your own corruption. 3 years of gathering insurance for the day you'd try to control me like you controlled my father. "This is blackmail," Park Jin-ho breathed. "This is evolution." Kyung-soo stood, his presence commanding the room. "You want to talk about tradition? About honor? Look at what our traditions have become. Corruption dressed in cultural purity. Cruelty disguised as preservation. We can evolve together, adapt to a changing world, or all burn every outdated tradition to the ground and build something better from the ashes. Your choice." Richard Harper surged to his feet. "The girl is still a gold-digging nobody who seduced—" "Careful." Kyung-soo's voice could have frozen blood. "Very careful how you finish that sentence." Min Jun, Kyung-soo's younger cousin, spoke from his position along the wall where younger family members observed. "Maybe we should ask ourselves why we're so threatened by change. The American woman was stealing from us, but we defended her because she looked acceptable. Miss Ruby has been nothing but loyal, yet we attack her for being different." Other younger members murmured agreement. The generational divide was suddenly starkly visible. "This is mutually assured destruction," Nam Kyung-ja said finally, her voice shaking. "You're threatening to destroy us all." "No," Kyung-soo corrected. "I'm offering you a choice. Accept that I will marry whom I choose, leave us in peace, and these folders disappear forever. Or force my hand, and we all burn together." Park Jin-ho stared at his nephew for a long moment. "You've redefined power on your own terms." "I learned from the best," Kyung-soo replied. "You taught me that power is everything. I'm simply using it for something that matters." The vote, when it came, was pragmatic rather than accepting, but pragmatism was enough. Kyung-soo had won, not through violence, but through intelligence, preparation, and the willingness to risk everything for love. 3 months later, the Kim family mansion had been transformed into something that had never existed before, a bridge between worlds. The ceremony space blended Korean and Western traditions so seamlessly that guests couldn't tell where one culture ended and another began. Red and white roses intertwined with African marigolds. Traditional Korean lanterns hung beside kente cloth banners. It was beautiful, impossible, and absolutely perfect. Cleo stood in the bridal preparation room, barely recognizing herself in the mirror. Her wedding gown was a masterpiece, ivory silk with intricate Korean embroidery flowing into African-inspired patterns along the train. The bodice featured traditional joggery elements, while the skirt held the dramatic flair of a Western ball gown. Her natural curls were styled into an elegant updo, woven with both jasmine flowers and Korean binyo ornaments. She was a fusion of everything she was, nothing hidden, nothing diminished. "You're shaking," Minjin's wife said gently, adjusting Cleo's veil, a delicate piece that had belonged to Kyung-soo's grandmother, offered by the family as a gesture of acceptance that had brought Cleo to tears. "Good shaking or terrified shaking?" Cleo asked. "Does it matter? You're about to marry the man who challenged the entire syndicate for you." The ceremony began with a traditional Kyongso pyebaek, but modified. Instead of Cleo bowing in subservience, she and Kyongso bowed together to his family elders, a symbol of mutual respect rather than hierarchy. Park Jin-ho, dressed in formal hangok, accepted their bow with something that might have been approval flickering in his stern expression. He offered them jujubes and chestnuts, symbols of children and harmony, with hands that no longer trembled with rage but with cautious hope. Kyongso was devastating in traditional hanbok of deep crimson and gold, the colors of passion and prosperity. His dark eyes never left Cleo as she approached, and she saw everything in that gaze. 3 years of restrained longing, 3 months of fighting for this moment, a lifetime of promises yet to be made. The vows were bilingual, each phrase spoken first in Korean, then English, weaving their languages together like their lives. "I promise to honor you," Kyongso said, his voice carrying across the assembled guests, Korean family members, American colleagues, African community leaders, friends from every corner of their blended world. "To stand with you against any storm, to choose you every day, in every way, for as long as I breathe." Cleo's voice was steady, clear, no longer the whisper of someone trying to be invisible. "I promise to be your partner in all things, to bring my full self to our marriage, my strength, my culture, my love, to build with you a family that honors where we've been while creating something entirely new." When Kyongso kissed his bride, 300 guests erupted in applause that crossed all cultural boundaries. He then changed into a striking Western suit, not black, but deep burgundy, another bold choice that declared his refusal to conform. While Cleo kept her fusion gown, both of them walking into their reception as themselves, fully and unapologetically. The reception was a revelation. Korean dishes sat beside soul food, traditional music blended with contemporary beats, and guests who might never have occupied the same space moved together in celebration. Minjun's children played with Cleo's young cousins, languages mixing into joyful chaos. The emotional peak came when Park Jin-ho stood to offer a toast. The room fell silent, 3 months of tension crystallizing into this single moment. "I am an old man," he began in Korean, then switched to English, "set in old ways. I believed tradition was everything, that deviation from our path meant destruction." He looked at Cleo, and something had softened in his stern features. "This woman taught me that strength comes in unexpected forms, that evolution is not betrayal, but survival, that love," his voice caught slightly, "that love can expand our world rather than diminish it." He raised his glass. "To Kyongso and Cleo Kim, may they build something better than what we gave them." The toast echoed through the room, and Cleo felt tears slip down her cheeks as Kyongso pulled her close. She was no longer invisible. She was celebrated, seen, worthy. She was finally, impossibly, home. 6 months into their marriage, Cleo Kim walked into the executive conference room wearing a tailored navy suit that commanded attention, her natural curls styled professionally, a tablet tucked under her arm containing the strategic analysis that would reshape the Kim family's international operations. The younger family members stood in respect. Even the older associates who had initially resisted her presence now nodded with grudging acknowledgement. "The Nigerian market," Cleo began, her presentation appearing on the screen behind her, "represents untapped potential that we've ignored because of outdated assumptions about African economies. My contacts in Lagos have identified 3 key partners whose operations align with our interests. The cultural bridge I can provide gives us advantages our competitors lack." She spoke for 20 minutes, her intelligence, hidden for 3 years while she cleaned and served, now fully unleashed. She detailed supply chains, cultural considerations, risk assessments, and profit projections with the precision of someone who had been observing, learning, and preparing without anyone knowing. Kyung-soo sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral, but she caught the pride burning in his dark eyes. His wife, his partner, his equal. The vote to pursue her strategy was unanimous. After the meeting, Minjun approached her in the hallway. "My sister wants to work in the family business, but the elders say women should focus on other things. Could you mentor her?" It wasn't the first request. In 6 months, Cleo had become what she'd never imagined possible, a bridge for others who didn't fit traditional molds. The Korean-American kid struggling with cultural identity, the brilliant analyst passed over for promotion because of his background, the women told their ambitions were inappropriate. She was changing the Kim family business from within, making it something that could evolve and survive in a globalizing world. That evening, Cleo found Kyung-soo in their private office, no longer his alone, but theirs, reviewing contracts. She moved behind his chair, her hands on his shoulders, and he leaned back into her touch with the casual intimacy of married life. "Minjun's sister wants mentorship," she said, "and the Choi family's daughter, and about 6 others." "You're building an army," Kyung-soo observed, amusement in his voice. "I'm building a future where people like me don't have to be invisible to be safe." He turned in his chair, pulling her onto his lap with easy strength. "Speaking of futures, I've been thinking about children, about what we'd teach them." Cleo's breath caught. They discussed it abstractly, but this felt different, real. And "I want them to grow up in a world where their mother's strength is celebrated, not hidden, where their mixed heritage is an advantage, not an obstacle." His hand found her stomach, resting there with gentle possibility. "I want them to never doubt they belong everywhere." Cleo felt tears burn her eyes, the good kind. 3 years ago, I was invisible, just a maid who didn't matter. "You were never just anything." Kyung-soo's voice was fierce. "You were brilliant, kind, and strong. I just gave you space to stop hiding." "We gave each other space," she corrected. "You were suffocating under duty until you chose yourself." They moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spreading below them like a kingdom they'd fought to claim. Kyung-soo's arm wrapped around her waist, both of them reflected in the glass, equal, powerful, transformed. Cleo thought about the woman she'd been, moving through marble halls like a shadow, believing invisibility was safety. She thought about the terrified maid who'd watched her employer cancel his wedding, certain disaster was coming. She thought about every moment of fear, every battle fought, every barrier broken. She had spent 3 years learning to be invisible, perfecting the art of taking up no space, of mattering to no one. Now, in Kyung-soo's world remade, in their world built together from courage and love, she was impossible to ignore. Not because of him, though his love had been the catalyst, but because she had finally learned to see herself. And once she could see herself clearly, her worth, her strength, her brilliance, the whole world had no choice but to see her too. "Ready to change everything again tomorrow?" Kyung-soo murmured against her hair. Cleo smiled, her reflection in the glass showing a woman fully visible, fully powerful, fully home. Always.